So as we say that Culture Quest this year, we're taking it to international, and in particular, this week, we are in China. And in this series, we'll be highlighting various prospects of culture and tourism in China. I'll be visiting unique places, as well as talking to experts in this space. And also, at the same time, looking at what are the correlation between China and Kenya, as China and Kenya have had 62 years of diplomacy and cooperation in trade and various sectors. So stay tuned as we bring the series all the way from China.
A major thing I've learned about this is the way cultural heritage is taken very seriously and a critical component of development in China.
What I have learned is the people of this country are really invested themselves in maintaining their culture, and appreciating where they are coming from. The government is also heavily invested in ensuring the people are getting something out of maintaining the culture themselves.
What stands out in China?
Their identity in terms of all elements of culture, including their foods, their way of life, and their natural as well as their cultural heritage. It's part and parcel of their life.
Welcome to China, one of the world's oldest civilizations.
Beijing is the most World Cultural Heritage City in the world, in total 8. They are the Forbidden City, Chinese Wall, Summer Palace, Temple of Heaven, Mingtu, Grand Canal, and Beijing Meridian Line, and the Peking Man living place. So Chinese people are very proud of it. We have so many World Cultural Heritage in Beijing, and we are looking forward to seeing the friends from all over the world come to visit Beijing and come to visit China. So China is a country has a long history, more than 5,000 years of history. So if you come to visit China, you can know a lot about history and eat very authentic Chinese food.
A land where ancient wisdom flows not only through books and monuments, but through everyday's life.
Our trip to China now brings us to the Summer Palace in Beijing, one of the memorable heritage sites of this great country in terms of heritage preservation. And as an anthropologist, I'm just intrigued how the Chinese have kept their history intact. We find that back home in Kenya, we have a very rich history, but we tend to talk about other people's history. We tend to glorify other people's achievements, people who came to visit Africa, people who came to visit Kenya.
In terms of intangible cultural heritage, I would love to say that China is at another level, especially on its gastronomy or culinary heritage. We have had an experience of preparing our own food today, looking at the different food varieties that they're giving and how best one can prepare his own meal. So this is really good, especially when you talk about, transmission of ICH from not just generation to generation, but even to people across the continents. I think this is very, very, very good and very interesting. I love the whole idea of, people preparing that what they want to eat. Because, of course, it touches their heart, it touches their souls, and that is the very basis of intangible cultural heritage.
In the People's Republic of China, Intangible cultural heritage is the living soul of the nation, passed down through generations, preserved not just in history books, but in the heart and hands of its people.
So the Fujian region dialect is declining, and the government pay more attention to this problem. So they carry out relevant courses to let students to learn the dialect during the school. So this is all the ways we try to spread and carry on and inherit our intangible cultural heritage.
The places we've been to, 95%, if not 99%, are Chinese who visit those places. You see very few foreign people visiting those places. I mean, we mingle mostly with the Chinese. And what does that tell you? That the Chinese society, the Chinese government has created a niche for local tourism, and they know and believe that you reap from home before you go for the foreign. And you'll find that in our own country, in Kenya, Kenyans don't feel much at home in the industry set, in the tourism industry settings. And you ask yourselves why? Because our tourism is packaged for the international.
Across both rural and urban landscapes, a grassroots commitment emerges, a collective effort to protect identity by safeguarding not only artifacts, but also crafts, performance, and customs that define daily life.
In the Northern Song Dynasty, Kaifeng City was the most prosperous period in the ancient times. And about 1,000 years ago, this city was the largest city in the world, as the most prosperous. At that time, the population at the city can be reached at 1.5 to 1.7 million.
Beijing became the capital about 800 years ago by Mongolian people. Genghis Khan, his grandson Kumbhala Khan, established the Yuan dynasty with the capital city in Beijing. So Beijing is the city both old and young. The city appeared about 3,000 years ago. So Beijing used to be called Yan because 3,000 years ago, Beijing located in one of the kingdom. It was called Yan. Yeah, so another name, the old name of Beijing was called Yan. And the capital started from the Yuan dynasty.
Both China and Kenya share this deeply rooted passion for cultural heritage. Though their systems may differ, one thing is clear. In both nations, the drive to protect, celebrate, and pass on tradition is community-led, deeply felt, and powerfully endured.
Kenya has a multifaceted and robust relationship with China that goes way back to 1963 upon Kenya's attainment of independence. These bilateral relationships traverse various fields from agriculture, technology, education, fisheries, as well as cultural heritage. In the field of cultural heritage, for instance, we have a standing bilateral relationship with the Chinese government that covers areas such as preservation of culture and heritage. This particular training that brought us to China is on intangible cultural heritage and tourism integration for tourism development in Kenya, which has taken us about 2 weeks. And within these 2 weeks, we've been able to visit a number of cultural heritage sites within China, from the Toulouse in Beijing to the Millennium City Gardens in Kaifeng, to the Forbidden Gardens in Beijing, the Millennium Gardens, the Summer Gardens, as well as the Longmen Grottos in Luoyang province. In visiting all these areas, I think there are significant lessons and observations that we have made throughout the 2-week period.
One key one, for instance, is the role of policy, the role of legal frameworks, as well as international conventions in the preservation and promotion of cultural heritage sites.
China and Kenya are signatories to the 2003 UNESCO Convention for the Safeguarding of the Intangible Cultural Heritage.
Policies and legal frameworks are at the center of the preservation of Chinese cultural heritage, and I think for Kenya, this is something that we could easily learn from. For instance, as a country, we still don't have an intangible cultural heritage policy, and therefore, this is something that would be important for us to establish and work towards its actualization.
China has already made significant strides in implementing the convention. It is within this framework that China graciously sponsored a seminar on intangible cultural heritage and tourism integration development in Kenya, which happened on 22nd May to 4th June at Zanzu College of Science and Technology.
The objectives of this seminar is to capacity build African countries on matters of ICH, how to promote, to conserve, and to safeguard ICH. That is exactly the mandate of NATCOM with respect to culture. So we are not here by chance, we are here because we contribute directly towards the achievements of the objectives of the seminar.
Successive governments have taken culture as something that is trivial. We are realizing that this is not as trivial as we thought. China is reaping maximum from their own culture. We were asking here whether they have national parks. They told us no. What they only have are zoos. They don't have national parks in China. I don't know how far true that is. But for us, it is the national parks which attract most of our tourists, and yet these tourists, again, are foreign. And you know, foreign tourists, the national tourists are very frivolous. Anything that may go wrong, we had COVID-19, which cut off tourism. And people had to be laid off. Sometimes we have terrorist attacks. And then we have these periodic travel advisories that also make it very difficult for tourists to come. We have maybe outbreaks of some epidemic, which may also make tourists stay away. We have enough people in Kenya who can make our tourism thrive. But that can only be done if we invest in our cultural heritage.
The seminar brought together government officials in charge of ICH and tourism, researchers and scholars, and community inheritors of intangible cultural heritage. The seminar entailed different kinds of training methods, such as lectures, hands-on practicals, and field visits.
There are a number of takeaways that we are taking back home and see how best we can as well manage and conserve our sites with the experiences that we have had at the Great Wall of China. One of it is we need to ensure that we put adequate resources into our sites, making sure that they're well restored, taken care of. This is the only way where we can actually get as many visitors as possible, because a neglected site does not attract visitors. So you look at sites like Gede, Mount Kenya, they actually have the potential to attract as many visitors as possible if we can only put resources to them, if we can restore them, if we can conserve them.
Just 45 minutes I've been walking this particular Great Wall, and it brings me minds and thinking how many years this was built, and how could these people, the ancient Chinese, carry the rocks and build such a magnificent structure or the rock. This is indeed a outstanding universal value of the Chinese people. And this is also possible that we can do this back home in Kenya.
They have put life into a wall. Life into a wall. We can put life into our heritage and bring it life. A Masai Manyata, give it life. A Wanga Kingdom, give it life. Go to Gede Hills, give it life. Go to Mombasa Town, give it life. Go to Lamu, give it life. And invest in them. And then we shall have this kind of flow of local tourists and international tourists into our regions. This is marvelous.
I have just noted that even traditional medicine is packaged well within the tourism industry. You go from one shop, the next one, there's somebody selling Chinese traditional medicine. And back home, it's a challenge for us because we have wonderful landscapes like the Rift Valley. We have the Kakamega Forest, which we could be highlighting, where people from all over the world, even researchers in traditional medicine, could be coming, and it could be earning a lot of money for our nation.
This seminar brought out the interaction between intangible cultural heritage and tourism, offering a wealth of lessons on how Kenya can build on her cultural tourism potential.
In some of the World Heritage sites that we visited, a good example being the Toulouse in Nanjing province, what we were able to observe is ICH has been deeply integrated into the World Heritage site itself. Talking of the materials that have been used, the technological skills that were used in the construction of the Toulouse is actually an attestation of the application of intangible cultural heritage in tangible heritage management, especially matters to do with World Heritage sites. I think for our country, Kenya, this is something that we could easily do. Some of our sites, including Thimli Chohinga in Migori, for instance, can be a good example where the techniques that were used in building the Hohingas is something that we can document and apply.
Other than having the policy, we also need to build capacities for our people. First of all, to appreciate culture. And two, to love it and to ensure that it is transmitted to the next generation of our people. We have talked about culture being devolved. To what extent are the people at the county level able, the officers at the county level, able to implement the culture conventions? So we need to do that. Create, build capacities, ensure that people have the right knowledge and skills to implement the conventions and to safeguard culture in its entirety.
Through these sessions, Kenya's delegates learned firsthand from China's success stories, hoping to create a similar models that will help drive the country's cultural tourism sector forward.
We know that we have lost two ICH, very iconic ICH items. The Kikoi and the Kianda. Kiondo. We've lost them, I think, to Japan. Both of them. It's a sorry state of affairs. Why? Because at the time we were losing those items, our IP, intellectual property laws and processes were not very robust. I think the government is moving very fast, and at the moment we have the documentation and digitization of local cultural expressions and indigenous processes, indigenous knowledge of genetic as well as cultural aesthetic materials. That we need these materials stored and identified as Kenyan, then stored as Kenyan, so that anybody who wants to use these materials must first of all get permission from the holders and practitioners of these cultural heritage aspects.
And I think the first one for me as a ministry would be to revitalize the National Intangible Cultural Heritage Committee, which will then guide the process of the management and promotion of intangible cultural heritage in Kenya. I think secondly, Kenya does not have a policy on intangible cultural heritage. And I think that it is important that we start working towards establishing a national intangible cultural heritage for Kenya.
China has managed to drive its tourism by preserving and presenting its cultural assets such as Tenfuti Museum, Talo Cultural Village, Palace Museum in Beijing, the Great Wall of China, paper cutting art, and embroidered art. Heritage in both nations is not merely preserved, it lives, breathes, and weaves a timeless connection across generations and cultures. China's progress is remarkable, with robust implementation of UNESCO's ICH Convention and dedicated national policy. Cultural practitioners and communities have been empowered to preserve and promote their traditions.
What we have seen is that the government and mainstream communities in making entrepreneurship, there is a place where we have gone, and the site called Tolu, and actually the house owners are paid rent by the government itself. So the communities therefore are encouraged to continue conserving the historical sites that they have, because they see a meaning, they see the reason of having this conservation in place.
Having many heritage sites is a plus for any country, because one heritage site translates into so many investments. You know, like the other day we listed Gede into the World Heritage Site. So one site we can talk about direct employments, tour guides, we talk about the curators, we talk about food vendors, we talk about researchers. So one heritage site, you know, brings in a lot of investments in an area. When that happens, it translates into, you know, improving the local economy, improving livelihoods of local communities. So the number of World Heritage Sites and elements of intangible cultural heritage present in a country translates into many investments.
Through initiatives like this seminar and the devolution of culture in Kenya, the 47 counties are poised to reap the benefits of a robust cultural tourism economy, ensuring that the wealth generated flows back to local communities.
But then getting the opportunity to be in China, I learned what is called ICH, which is very important, intangible culture heritage. What I have learned in China is that they respect, they promote, and they usually utilize their culture in their administration and their daily activities.
In contrast, Kenya's efforts, though vibrant, face systemic challenges. With the limited government support, much of the work falls to passionate individuals, cultural institutions, NGOs, and international partners.
We need to move a step higher as a country to ensure that our heritage resources are well kept. If we are talking about Fort Jesus, how well kept is Fort Jesus? If you go to Fort Jesus today, are you able to get all the amenities that you'd want to see, you know, in a heritage place like Fort Jesus? If you go to Mount Kenya, for example, is it well taken care of? Thimli Chohinga and all the other World Heritage Sites, are they taken care of to the level and standards that we all need to see? That is something that we have learned from China. And once we do that, then there are ripple over effects. One, we have so many tourists visiting these heritage sites. That translates into employment, direct and indirect employment, and of course improved livelihoods for local communities that are taking care of this heritage.
China and Kenya continues to strengthen their 62 years of cooperation in trade, heritage and tourism. These partnerships are key to unlocking a new frontier in its cultural tourism economy. Yet the seminar marked a meaningful shift. Beyond trade and infrastructure, it emphasized cultural exchange, a dialogue built on mutual respect and understanding. Through immersive learning and hands-on experiences, the program laid the groundwork for long-term cultural diplomacy between Kenya and China.
The ministry where the State Department of Culture is housed should actually be given a lot of support, and I would say financial support. And you know, here, the Ministry of Commerce is very instrumental. So back home, the Ministry of Trade should work hand in hand with the Ministry of Culture and Sports, and where the State Department is housed, to make this a very central theme in our development.
Together, Kenya and China are building more than roads and ports. They are building bridges of memory and meaning. In this shared journey, culture becomes the compass, guiding nations across generations, connecting people beyond borders. For Culture Quest, I'm Levis Msumba.